Hi folks, Michael Neff here, Director of Gears Sports, and right now we're going to do a little video on how to calibrate the gears volume. You see in my hand here that we have what's called the calibration wand. It comes in a nice box that's a really nice box that we put a lot of time into actually. To protect this, we really want to make sure that this never gets bent or broken. But it comes in this little, kind of pulling apart so that we can ship it a little bit easier. As you can see here, there's a little cleat on the bottom of this, and then there's a little cleat there. You just kind of slide it into that cleat, and then there's a screw. And you see here that you screw on top. You want to make sure that's snug. You also want to make sure that these markers are not twisted out or wobbling around. This is really important. So make sure that these are nice and tight, okay? And that all these screws are nice and tight. So you want to get your wand ready. You also have what's called a ground plane. In your gears volume, this one is kind of an older version, the new ones are much smaller than this, but they both work. This is what the ground plane is. This is how we know where the target is. This is how we know where the XYZ coordinates of the room is. So this is how we know where the ground is. And these are the two tools that we'll need for calibration. One of the most important things that we do in calibrating is we make sure that the volume, we call it the volume, or just the area that we're going to capture in, we want to make sure that that area is clear of any reflective markers. So we don't want gears clubs or extra gears clothing in view of any of the cameras. If you're going to be operating the room and you're going to be wearing this, you need to, if you're going to wear Echo golf shoes, then you need to learn how to put a little piece of black strip around the retroreflective part. So not everything that's silver is retroreflective. Retroreflective is this shiny material that when the LEDs light up on the cameras, this becomes like really bright. And that's how we're able to see the center of that marker, which is so critical. So the LEDs, retroreflective markers, you want to make sure that you're not wearing anything of that on your clothes. And if you are, you want to mask that with a piece of tape or something like that. So no markers in the room. You want to make sure that you're not wearing any markers. Nothing reflective, okay? Then simply go to the software. Double click on gears. There's going to be a little thing that validates the license. And then it's going to open, and you're going to see this thing where it says finding cameras, and it said cameras found, but you want to make sure that this goes all the way. You want to make sure that all 8, and if you have 7 cameras or 6 cameras, however many cameras you have, you want to make sure that the system finds all 8 cameras and then that finishes its job. Okay? Then you're going to go to this button called Setup. And this is basically saying calibrate the volume. Capture volume has not been calibrated yet, so we're about ready to do that. I can either cancel and leave here, or I can get started. One of the things, so we're going to hit start, get started. And you'll see here that a little step 1 of 4, aim and focus the cameras. Well, we've already aimed and focused the cameras. When you installed your gear system, you aimed and focused your cameras. And unless they moved or you moved them, you don't need to go through this step. If you want to see where the cameras are aimed, or if you feel like they have been moved, you just simply click the camera over here, and that goes to camera 2, camera 3, camera 4, so you can really see what's kind of happening there. When you're done aiming and focusing the cameras, now we're on step 2 of 4. Now, this little guy right here tells you how many visible objects the system is seeing, or how many things could be or are reflective. Right now it's saying that there's 25, and that's because I'm holding this wand in my hand. So I'm going to get rid of the wand, or I could hide it, or something of that nature. So now we're down to 6 or 7 markers, okay? Now there's a few straggling markers that I see kind of over here. Some of your systems, depending on how wide the cameras, they might be seeing the LED lights of the other cameras. Those get masked out, so we don't have to worry about that. But there's still a couple of straggling markers in here. There's only 8 of them, but I would probably maybe consider changing that and finding out where those are and getting rid of them. So now that we've kind of done that, then we hit this button called mask objects. And you wait for this to go to 0. So what it did there was it masked anything that looks like a marker. Because remember, the system is trying to track it. It only knows, it's looking for a specific number of markers, and they have to be in the right position. And that's how the system knows what to do. So if it sees straggling markers, then it's going to have a hard time doing that. So that's why we mask those things in case it shows up, and we want to basically get this to where it's 0. Now, if you're in a room, there's a little icon down here, a gears icon, that you can go to settings with, okay? And there's a little tab here called cameras, okay? And right now we're running at 100 exposure, 240 frames per second, and an IR intensity or infrared intensity of 15, okay? So if you're in an outdoor environment or you have a lot of light, ambient light coming in, changing the IR intensity is the first step that you'd want to do. So we'd maybe take that down to 12 or 13. So let's say right now I already masked all of my markers, but I still see some visible objects. So I masked it, but I still see some visible objects. Then you come over here to IR intensity and you'd kind of lower that a little bit until we got down to 0. So see, we want to basically get that to 0. And once it's at 0 and we've masked it, then we're in good shape. As long as the cameras don't move, we are going to be within 0.2 millimeters. Again, that's super accurate, very, very accurate. So that's how you find out. That's how you can kind of fine tune, because every gears lab has a little different volume. The other thing that happens almost in every case, I know this doesn't seem possible, but when a lot of you has garage doors, so when you open the garage doors, you can hit outside onto your range. Moving the garage doors up actually vibrates the walls and oftentimes will cause the system to go out of calibration. Also, for you in the south, or if you have a lot of temperature issues, if it's nice and 60, 70 degrees in your room and you open the door, it's going to go up to about 80 degrees in about 20 minutes. And that huge change of temperature, that quickly change of temperature, you'd be surprised at how much the walls actually expand. We measure this, and they can move up to 2 inches depending on your building. So when you open that door and the temperature goes way up in the room, that can actually widen or make the system go out of calibration. So the rule of thumb, you want to calibrate in the environment that you're going to be hitting in. Okay? So if you're going to be hitting indoor to outdoor, you want to make sure that the door's open and you want to calibrate in that environment. So that means that you might have to adjust the IR intensity, possibly the exposure down a little bit to 60 or 50, or 50 is kind of low. If you don't change the IR intensity down, you'd have to change your exposure a little bit more. But we want you to first change the IR intensity down until we hit 0. So those are the things that if you're indoor, pretty much never have to worry about that stuff. All you have to worry about is pretty much making sure that the markers are not being seen by the cameras, or the stray markers are not invisible. So if your gears close or over here and that camera can see it, you want to make sure and hide those clothes or put them in a closet or something like that. So this is how you would adjust depending on your situation, where you're at, how much sunlight's coming in. So gears can work indoor, outdoor, and it can work outdoor fully as well. But the shading and the time of day and how the light is moving around is kind of important. If you have a cloudy day, you can put your cameras on tripods and capture all day long, no problem. If you have a sunny day, then you got to be a little bit more careful. When the sun kind of gets to the horizon and it's pointing right at the cameras, it's really tricky to capture. But when it's overhead, no problem. But you're going to have to adjust that IR intensity and exposure for outdoor environments. But let's say for this purpose, that's kind of a special case. And if you want to capture outdoor, you're going to need to consult with us on that. The Prime 17W camera really is a much better camera for outdoor, and we're the best at outdoor capture. So it's definitely possible. But in your environment, we really are just after getting this down to 0. We don't want to see any visible objects, okay? So once we do that, you can close this window right here. Then we say done masking once we hit 0. Okay? Then step 3 of 4 comes up and says, try to fill each camera as much as possible for the best tracking performance. So what I'm doing now is I'm going to tell the system where I'm going to hit from. Because right now there's just 8 cameras that are pointed here. But they don't know where the ground is yet, and they don't know where I'm going to be hitting balls from. So I need to basically wand this room or tell the system where I'm going to be hitting balls from. Or wherever a marker, wherever the club could get. So a club can go way up here on the backswing for right and left-handed. So you want to basically make sure that you cover the entire volume or the area that you're going to be hitting balls from, right-handed or left-handed. So what I've already hit done wanding, and this button came up 3 of 4. So now what I want to do is press start wanding. And what I'm going to do is kind of in a circle 8 at about this pace, okay? I'm going to walk around the room like you see me doing here. I don't want to just stand in one place, okay? And what you see here is that I'm painting that screen, okay? Kind of in a figure 8 motion. And what I'm trying to do is basically get really good coverage, okay? If I just stand in one place, like right here, and I just kind of wander around, I'm not going to be able to get to all the places that I need to. There's no right or wrong way to do this, but you just want to make sure that you're moving around. You also want to make sure that you wand this area really well. You know, get the marker down kind of close to where the teeing area is for both right and left-handed. Also, you want to make sure that you get kind of above your head for those backswing, wherever a marker is going to be in the volume. That's what we're after. You see here that took about 20 seconds or so. I've filled in these markers very nicely, and I hit done wanding. Calibration of gears takes less than 1 minute. And you'll see that this is completing its processing right now. So I can go get my ground plane. And if it does it correctly, it'll say success, and I can hit done wanding. Okay? Then I get my ground plane. Now, this ground plane is important. This is how we know where 0 is. This is how we know where X, Y, and Z are. Okay? So what you want to do is you want to point the long stem right here. This is the Z. You want to point the long arm of this L. Now, the new calibration square is much smaller than this, but it does have a longer arm. So the longer arm goes toward your target. And in your volume, if you're going to hit right and left-handed, it's best to basically put the wand in the middle so that you're basically hitting from the same spot whether you're right or left-handed. But you could just put it really anywhere you want. You really want to have this pointed at your target, and then make sure that it's level. On the bottom of it, there's these little feet, and you can kind of wheel these in and out. And you basically want, and there's little bubbles or levels on there's little levels on this, on that, so you know if it's level or not. That's really important. Once you have that down, and these markers basically represent your target. So if you're going to use a radar device or a quad or something, you want to make sure that you basically line your target line up with that, those 2 markers there. So you come on over here. So after I hit set ground plane, this little tab comes up and says done setting ground plane, and you just click that, and we have successfully completed the process. So really it's about a 1 minute process to calibrate the room, and the cameras can go out of calibration easier than one might think. Mostly it's caused from the door of a driving range building going up and down. You wouldn't think that that would move the walls, but it does. This is why it's so important on your installation that you go into the studs of your building when you do the walls or put up the speed rail. So it's really important that you get into the studs and make sure that those walls aren't moving. But temperature, wall movement, those can move the cameras. You'd be surprised. So it's not a bad practice every day. It literally takes 1 minute. Just, calibrate. But you really want to make sure that you calibrate in the volume that you're going to capture. So if you're going to be hitting outside, you want to capture with the door open. If you're going to be hitting inside, you want to capture with the door closed. And that's probably the best advice we can give you. Obviously, this is one of the, It takes about a minute. It's a little bit of a price to pay to really get an accurate volume, and it doesn't take very long, but it's kind of sometimes hard for people to see that. But about 5 years ago, it took a long time to capture or to calibrate a big volume like this. So we're really we've come a long ways, and it's actually extremely fast. We are cutting-edge technology in optical motion capture for calibration. So anyways, thank you. Please call 1-855-GEARS now if you have any questions, and happy calibrating.